The unconscious map. Why we fall for the ones who make no sense. There are moments in life that refuse to obey logic. They arrive uninvited, disrupt the neat architecture of our plans, and leave behind questions that refuse to be silenced. Falling for someone who makes no sense is one of those moments. It does not announce itself politely. It does not ask whether the timing is right or whether the person fits the criteria you spent years constructing in your mind. It simply happens, quietly, violently, inevitably. You meet them, and something inside you shifts. Not dramatically at first. No fireworks. No cinematic slow motion. Instead, it feels like a subtle distortion in reality, as if the air has thickened, as if your inner compass has been nudged off course. You walk away from the encounter and feel unsettled, unable to explain why a stranger now occupies mental territory that once belonged only to you. You replay their words, their expressions, their presence. And the most disturbing part is not the attraction itself, but the familiarity. The eerie sense that this person has touched something ancient inside you, something you did not know how to name. Carl Jung believed these moments are not romantic coincidences. They are psychological events of profound importance, signals rising from the unconscious demanding attention. To Jung, love was never merely a social contract or a chemical reaction. It was a confrontation with the deepest layers of the psyche. And before we can understand true love, we must first understand why we so often mistake illusion for destiny, according to Jung. When most people say they are in love, they are not encountering another human being at all. They are encountering themselves. This is the uncomfortable truth modern culture rarely wants to hear. When we first fall for someone, we are not seeing them clearly. We are watching a private film projected onto the screen of their body. The characters, the storyline, the emotional intensity, all of it originates from within us. Jung called this process projection, and he believed it was one of the most powerful forces shaping human relationships. Each of us carries an invisible inner world. A world formed by childhood experiences, unmet needs, repressed desires, cultural conditioning, and emotional wounds we never fully healed. Much of this inner material does not live in our conscious awareness. It sinks into the unconscious, where it quietly waits for an opportunity to express itself. Love provides that opportunity. When you encounter someone who unconsciously resembles the shape of your hidden longings, your psyche responds instantly. Without consulting reason, without waiting for evidence, it casts an image onto them. You begin to see not who they are, but who you need them to be. They become the carrier of your unlived life. If you grew up feeling unsafe, abandoned, or emotionally unseen, you may project strength, protection, or unconditional presence onto someone who appears confident or grounded. If you were forced to suppress your creativity, sensuality, or rebellion in order to be accepted, you may find yourself magnetically drawn to someone chaotic, passionate, or unconventional. They seem alive in the ways you were not allowed to be. This is why attraction often feels irrational. It is not responding to the present moment. It is responding to the past. Jung argued that this initial phase of love is inherently narcissistic, not in a shallow, insulting sense, but in a psychological one. You are not yet loving the other person as an independent being. You are loving the reflection of your own soul that appears to be looking back at you through their eyes. This is why the beginning of love feels intoxicating. You feel seen, understood, completed. But what you are really experiencing is temporary contact with parts of yourself that have been dormant for years. The modern world celebrates this stage endlessly. We call it chemistry, sparks, soulmates, but Jung warned that this phase is not love. It is the precondition for love and also its greatest danger, because projections cannot survive reality. Eventually, the image begins to crack. The person fails to live up to the fantasy. They say something disappointing. They reveal a flaw that does not fit the role you assign them. They act ordinary when you needed them to be extraordinary. This is the moment when many relationships collapse. People say, the magic is gone, or I fell out of love. But from a Jungian perspective, this is not the end of love. It is the beginning of it. When the projection dissolves, you are left standing before a real human being, someone with contradictions, insecurities, blind spots, and limits, someone who cannot save you, complete you, or permanently rescue you from yourself. At this stage, a choice emerges, though most people are unaware they are making one. You can withdraw and search for a new screen onto which you can project your inner movie again. Or you can stay and allow the encounter to transform you. True love, Jung believed, only begins once the illusion dies. This is why real love feels far less glamorous than fantasy, especially at first. It requires humility. It requires grief for the idealized image you must let go of. And most terrifying of all, it requires responsibility for your own inner world. You can no longer blame the other person for failing to make you whole. You are forced to confront the truth that they were never meant to, but not every connection survives this transition. Many were never meant to. Jung distinguished between relationships that exist to soothe the ego and those that exist to serve the soul. Ego-based relationships are comfortable. They reinforce who you already believe yourself to be. They validate your persona, the mask you wear to function in society. Soul-based relationships, by contrast, are destabilizing. They challenge your self-image. They expose contradictions. They call you into a deeper version of yourself, whether you are ready or not. This is why the people who matter most in our lives often feel threatening before they feel safe. At the center of Jung's understanding of love lies one of his most profound ideas, the anima and the animus. Jung believed that every man carries an unconscious feminine aspect. The anima in every woman carries an unconscious masculine aspect, the animus. These are not social roles or stereotypes, but psychological energies. The anima represents intuition, emotional depth, receptivity, and connection to the unconscious. The animus represents structure, clarity, direction, and assertive consciousness. Throughout life, we develop one side more consciously while the other remains hidden. Culture, upbringing, and personal history often determine which parts of us are allowed expression and which are pushed into the shadows. The neglected side does not disappear. It waits. And when you meet someone who embodies the energy you have disowned, recognition occurs. This recognition does not feel like desire alone. It feels like inevitability, like gravity, like something long separated has finally found its counterpart. Jung described this encounter as numinous, a sacred psychological experience that carries emotional intensity, mystery, and transformation. This is why some connections feel instantly significant even when they defy logic. Your psyche recognizes something before your mind can catch up. It is not saying this person is perfect. It is saying this person holds a missing piece of me. But here lies the danger. If you believe the other person is the source of that missing piece, you become dependent on them for wholeness. This is where obsession, fear of loss, and emotional instability are born. Jung was clear: the anima or animus does not belong to the other person. They merely activate it within you. The purpose of love is not possession. It is integration. The tragedy of modern relationships is that we often cling to the other person instead of reclaiming the part of ourselves they awakened. We confuse the messenger for the message, and when the relationship inevitably fails to sustain the projection, bitterness follows. But when a connection is truly aligned with the soul, something different happens after the illusion breaks. Instead of collapsing into resentment, the relationship deepens. Instead of anxiety, there is aliveness. Instead of losing yourself, you begin to find yourself. Jung believed that such relationships are not meant to make life easier. They are meant to make life truer. This brings us to a crucial distinction. Not every intense connection is meaningful, and not every meaningful connection is meant to last forever. Some people enter your life to reveal wounds. Others arrive to teach boundaries. Very few arrive to walk alongside you as you become who you were always meant to be. To recognize the difference, we must move beyond romantic myths and into psychological awareness. We must ask not how strongly we feel, but how deeply we grow. Not how much we need the other person, but how much more ourselves we become in their presence. Jung believed that the unconscious always seeks balance. It pushes us toward experiences that compensate for what is missing in our conscious lives. Love, at its deepest level, is one of those compensatory forces. It is not there to indulge the ego, but to correct it. This is why love so often arrives disguised as disruption. It appears in the wrong timing, through the wrong person, under inconvenient circumstances, because its purpose is not comfort. Its purpose is awakening. In the next chapter, we will descend deeper into this process. We will explore why true love does not bring immediate peace but confrontation. Why the presence of the right person awakens the shadow instead of soothing it. And why the relationships that have the power to transform us often begin by unsettling everything we thought we knew about ourselves. The shadow awakens. Why true love disturbs before it heals. If love were only meant to comfort us, it would never change us. If it were only meant to soothe our fears, it would never demand courage. And if it were only meant to make us happy, it would never make us honest. Carl Jung understood something about love that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. The relationships that have the power to heal you will first expose what is broken. This is not a flaw in love. It is its function. When a connection moves beyond projection, when the fantasy dissolves and the other person remains, something extraordinary and unsettling begins to happen. The relationship stops being a mirror for your ideals and becomes a mirror for your wounds. This is the moment when love stops feeling magical and starts feeling dangerous. Jung called this confrontation the awakening of the shadow. The shadow is not evil, though it is often mistaken for it. The shadow is everything within you that you were never allowed to be. Every emotion you learned was unacceptable. Every desire you were shamed for. Every weakness you were punished for revealing. Over time, these parts of you were buried, not healed. Pushed into the unconscious, where they continued to influence your behavior from the dark. The shadow contains jealousy, rage, envy, fear, shame, but also vitality, creativity, sensuality, and power. Anything that did not fit the image you needed to survive was exiled. And exile creates pressure. Most relationships never reach deep enough to disturb the shadow. They remain surface-level exchanges between personas, two masks interacting politely. But when a connection is deep enough, when it reaches the core of the psyche, the shadow cannot remain hidden. This is why true love does not feel peaceful at first. Instead, it feels destabilizing. You find yourself reacting in ways that surprise you, feeling emotions that seem disproportionate to the situation. Old fears resurface. Abandonment anxiety, control issues, sudden jealousy, a desire to run just when things begin to matter. Many people interpret these reactions as signs that something is wrong with the relationship. Jung would say the opposite. He would say something real has finally been touched. A soul-level connection does not just validate who you think you are. It confronts who you have been avoiding. Your partner becomes a living mirror, not because they are trying to provoke you, but simply because their presence activates unresolved material within you. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of love. We are taught that if someone triggers us, they must be toxic. While this is sometimes true, it is not universally so. There is a crucial difference between a relationship that wounds you and a relationship that reveals your wounds. The difference lies in growth. When the shadow is activated in a meaningful connection, the pain points are specific, personal, precise. They point inward, not outward. You are not being diminished. You are being exposed. And exposure is terrifying when you have spent a lifetime hiding from yourself. Jung famously said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Love is one of the most powerful forces capable of doing exactly that. This is why the presence of the right person can feel like emotional surgery without anesthesia. They do not need to criticize you to make you uncomfortable. They do not need to accuse you to make you defensive. Their mere existence highlights the gap between who you are and who you could be. And the ego does not appreciate this. The ego wants stability, predictability, control. It wants love to fit neatly into the story it has already written about your life. But soul connections refuse to cooperate with those narratives. They arrive as interruptions. This brings us to one of the most important distinctions Jung made about relationships. The difference between vitality and anxiety. Many people confuse intensity with depth. They believe that the more dramatic a relationship feels, the more meaningful it must be. But Jung observed that there is a fundamental energetic difference between connections that drain the psyche and those that expand it. A trauma bond, often mistaken for passion, operates through fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. These relationships are marked by high highs and devastating lows. They keep the nervous system in a constant state of alert. You feel alive but exhausted, attached but insecure, desired but never safe. True love does not function this way. A soul-level connection operates through aliveness, not anxiety. Even when conflict arises, even when the shadow is activated, there is an underlying sense of grounding. The relationship does not consume your energy. It generates it. Jung believed the psyche obeys the principle of conservation of energy. When something is aligned with your deeper nature, it does not deplete you. It feeds you. You feel more creative, more capable, more yourself. Even silence shared with this person feels nourishing rather than empty. This is one of the clearest signs that a connection is real. It leaves you expanded, not diminished. Ask yourself this honestly. After spending time with this person, do you feel more alive or more anxious? More rooted or more destabilized? Do you feel clearer or more confused? True love may challenge you, but it does not erode your sense of self. False love demands that you abandon yourself to keep it alive. This distinction becomes even clearer when we examine Jung's concept of individuation. Individuation was the central goal of Jung's psychology. It is the process of becoming a whole, integrated individual, someone who has reconciled the conscious and unconscious aspects of their personality. Individuation is not about perfection. It is about authenticity. Most people enter relationships unconsciously seeking fusion. They want the other person to fill the emptiness inside them, to compensate for what they lack, to stabilize what they cannot regulate on their own. This is not love. It is survival. A relationship rooted in individuation looks entirely different. Instead of merging into one identity, two individuals walk parallel paths. They do not dissolve into each other. They sharpen each other. They encourage differentiation rather than dependency. Each person remains responsible for their own growth, their own healing, their own meaning. Paradoxically, this creates a bond that is far stronger than codependency. Jung believed that when two individuated people come together, they form what he called a conscious union. The relationship itself becomes a third entity, something greater than either person alone. But this only happens when both are committed to truth over comfort. This is why true love often disrupts your life beyond the relationship itself. You begin to question things you previously tolerated. Your job, your friendships, your routines, your values. The presence of someone who resonates with your deeper self makes superficiality unbearable. You can no longer live a life that contradicts who you are becoming. This is not because your partner demands change. It is because the unconscious, once awakened, cannot be put back to sleep. Many people panic at this stage. They blame the relationship for their discomfort and retreat to familiar patterns. Jung would say they chose the safety of the persona over the risk of the self, but those who endure the discomfort without abandoning themselves or the other enter a new phase of connection. This is where synchronicity begins to appear. Jung introduced the concept of synchronicity to describe meaningful coincidences that cannot be explained by cause and effect. These events are not random. They are symbolic. They reflect an alignment between the inner psychological state and the outer world. In the context of love, synchronicity often appears as improbable meetings, perfect yet inconvenient timing, repeated symbols, or shared inner experiences that manifest externally. You think of them just as they call. You meet them during a moment of existential crisis. Their arrival coincides with a major life transition. These events carry emotional weight. They feel charged. As if reality itself is participating in the relationship, Jung believes synchronicities occur when the psyche is undergoing transformation. They are signs that something significant is unfolding beyond conscious control. Not proof of destiny, but evidence of alignment. When inner change and outer events mirror each other, attention is required. But here, caution is essential. Synchronicity does not guarantee longevity. It guarantees meaning. Some connections are meant to ignite transformation, not to remain forever. Jung warned against clinging to symbols instead of integrating their message. This brings us to one of the most delicate truths about love. Not everyone who awakens your soul is meant to stay. Some people arrive as catalysts. They break open what was closed. They expose what was hidden. They awaken what was dormant. And once their work is done, the relationship ends. Not as a failure, but as a completion. Understanding this prevents bitterness. When we expect every profound connection to last forever, we turn growth into loss. But when we recognize that some relationships serve a specific psychological function, we can honor their role without trying to imprison them in permanence. True love is not defined by duration. It is defined by transformation. And this transformation demands radical authenticity. In Jungian terms, society trains us to develop a persona, socially acceptable identity designed to gain approval and avoid rejection. The persona is not false, but it is incomplete. It is a role, not a self. Most relationships function entirely at the level of the persona. People perform. They curate. They manage impressions. They hide their messages to remain desirable. But a soul-level connection makes this impossible. With the right person, the mask begins to slip, not because you choose vulnerability strategically, but because you cannot maintain the performance. You feel seen in a way that renders pretense exhausting. This is both terrifying and liberating. You reveal flaws you normally hide. You admit fears you usually suppress. You allow yourself to be uncertain, weak, imperfect. And if the connection is real, you are not punished for it. This does not mean there is no conflict. It means conflict does not threaten your worth. Radical authenticity is one of the clearest signs of true love. Not because it feels easy, but because it feels safe. Safe enough to be honest. Safe enough to be real. If you must constantly edit yourself to maintain the connection, it is not love. It is negotiation. And negotiation erodes the soul over time. As we approach the final chapter, we must confront the most dangerous confusion of all. The confusion between love and addiction. Jung was acutely aware of how easily the unconscious can hijack desire. He warned that unintegrated anima or animus projections can produce obsessive attachments that feel spiritual but are psychologically destructive. Modern psychology calls this limerence. Limerence is not love. It is fixation fueled by uncertainty. It thrives on inconsistency, distance, and intermittent reward. The emotional highs are intense, but the lows are devastating. You feel alive only when desired and empty when ignored. This is not soul recognition. It is unresolved trauma-seeking regulation, the alchemical union, wholeness, truth, and the love that frees you. At the end of every deep love story, there is a moment of reckoning. Not with the other person, but with yourself. This is the moment Carl Jung believed most people never reach. Not because it is hidden, but because it is unbearable to face. It is the moment when love stops asking what you want and begins asking who you are willing to become. By the time a relationship has survived projection, awakened the shadow, demanded authenticity, and disrupted the false structures of your life, it presents you with a final and uncompromising question. Will you choose truth or will you choose comfort? This is where real love separates itself from illusion once and for all. Jung believed that the ultimate purpose of love was not romance, companionship, or even happiness. Its purpose was wholeness. And wholeness, paradoxically, is not achieved by finding someone else to complete you. It is achieved by integrating what you have rejected within yourself. This is why Jung spoke of love in alchemical terms. Alchemy, in its psychological sense, was never about turning lead into gold. It was about transforming the fragmented psyche into an integrated whole. The ancient alchemists understood that transformation required fire, heat, pressure, a willingness to endure discomfort in service of something greater. Love, Jung believed, was one of the most powerful alchemical fires available to the human psyche, but only if you let it burn what is false. Most people approach love as an escape, an anesthetic, a solution to loneliness, insecurity, or emptiness. Jung would say this guarantees suffering, because when you ask another person to rescue you from yourself, you turn love into a burden it cannot carry. True love begins where rescue fantasies end. This is why Jung insisted that you are not looking for your other half. You are not incomplete. You are unfinished, and there is a crucial difference. Incompleteness implies deficiency. Unfinishedness implies potential. The tragedy of modern love is that we mistake need for destiny. When two incomplete people come together seeking completion, they form a closed system of dependency. Their relationship becomes fragile, reactive, and fear-driven. Love becomes conditional, threatened by distance, threatened by change, threatened by growth. But when two whole or actively individuating people meet, something radically different occurs. They do not cling. They do not consume. They do not imprison each other in roles. They meet freely. Jung called this the conjunctio, the sacred union. Not the union of two egos, but the conscious meeting of two integrated psyches. In such a relationship, love is no longer used to fill a void. It becomes an expression of abundance. This is why the most mature form of love feels strangely calm, not dull, not passionless, but grounded. There is desire, but not desperation. Attachment, but not fear. Intimacy, but not loss of self. This love does not demand that you abandon your path. It asks that you walk it more honestly. One of the most brutal truths Jung offered was this: real love will force you to dismantle a life that no longer fits who you are becoming. When you encounter a soul-level connection, it becomes increasingly difficult to tolerate falsehood elsewhere. You notice how much of your life has been built around expectation rather than authenticity. Careers chosen to impress, relationships maintained out of habit, values inherited but never examined. Love becomes a catalyst for existential clarity. Suddenly, staying in a job you hate feels unbearable. Maintaining shallow friendships feels exhausting. Living according to scripts written by family, culture, or fear feels like a slow death. This is not because love is distracting you from your responsibilities. It is because love is reminding you of yourself, and this is where many people retreat. They blame the relationship for the discomfort. They call it disruptive, unrealistic, or impractical. They convince themselves that wanting more is immature. Safer to return to the familiar misery than to risk transformation. Jung would say they chose the persona over the self. The self, in Jungian psychology, is the totality of the psyche, the integrated whole that includes conscious awareness, the shadow, the anima or animus, and the deeper organizing principle of meaning. Encountering the self is not comforting. It is humbling. It strips away illusions. Love that points you toward the self will never allow you to stay small. This is why true love feels like a crossroads. You cannot keep living the old life and keep the relationship intact. Something has to give. Either you shrink the love to fit your fear, or you expand your life to meet its truth. This choice has nothing to do with the other person's behavior. It has everything to do with your courage. At this stage, another confusion often arises, the confusion between longing and addiction. Jung warned that the unconscious is capable of producing overwhelming emotional intensity when unresolved wounds are activated. Modern psychology calls this limerence and obsessive. Consuming fixation fueled by uncertainty, inconsistency, and unmet childhood needs. Limerence feels urgent, desperate, all-consuming. You think about the person constantly. Your mood depends on their attention. You feel euphoric when desired and devastated when ignored. This intensity is often mistaken for depth. But Jung was clear: intensity is not intimacy. Intimacy brings clarity. Addiction brings confusion. Love brings freedom. Trauma brings compulsion. In limerence, the other person becomes a regulator for your nervous system. You are not connecting, you are coping. And no matter how spiritual or fated it feels, this pattern shrinks your life rather than expanding it. True love does the opposite. It stabilizes rather than dysregulates. It empowers rather than weakens. It invites growth rather than dependency. One of the simplest ways to tell the difference is this. Does this connection make you more honest with yourself or more avoidant? If you find yourself constantly anxious, analyzing every message, fearing abandonment, or betraying your values to keep someone close, you are not encountering destiny. You are reenacting a wound. Jung believed the psyche always seeks healing, but it does not always choose healthy methods. Without consciousness, we repeat pain rather than resolve it. This is why the most important relationship you will ever have is not with another person, but with your own unconscious. Jung's final insight about love was this: the outer union can never replace the inner one, the anima or animus. You project onto others is ultimately meant to be reclaimed, integrated, lived when you do this inner work. When you befriend your shadow, honor your emotions, develop your intuition or structure, you stop searching for completion outside yourself. And something remarkable happens. You stop chasing love. You stop begging for it. You stop tolerating relationships that require self-betrayal. You begin to radiate wholeness. And wholeness is magnetic. From this state, love no longer feels like a rescue mission. It feels like recognition. Two complete worlds choosing to meet not out of need, but out of resonance. This is the love Jung believed humanity was capable of but rarely achieved. Not a fairy tale, not a fantasy, but a conscious, living relationship between two individuals who have made peace with their own darkness. Such love is rare not because it is impossible, but because it requires responsibility. Responsibility for your wounds, responsibility for your projections, responsibility for your growth. It demands that you stop asking, does this person complete me? And start asking, does this person help me become more myself? That question is the final map Jung left behind. So do not rush to label your connections. Do not cling to intensity. Do not romanticize suffering. Turn inward. Do the shadow work. Integrate the parts of yourself you disowned. Become conscious of your patterns. When you do, love stops being something you fall into blindly and becomes something you meet with open eyes. And when real love arrives, it will not ask you to disappear. It will ask you to rise. Not as half a soul searching for completion, but as a whole being ready to walk beside another.